Okay, this is a weird kind of video. I'm calling it a rough cut because it's pretty rough. Here's what happened. I shot some footage that I was just planning on posting to Patreon because I hadn't scripted anything, I hadn't fully researched anything. I was just working on a project here at my house and I decided to film it. So I was saying a bunch of stuff off the cuff without any verification. I shot most of it on a crappy GoPro, plus some parts on my phone. So the footage was rough and shaky, but things happened while I was shooting it. And I just started thinking, man, I want to share this with everyone, so that's what I'm doing. This is basically just a vlog that I shot over the last couple days, and it's a mess. I don't really fully explain what the hell I'm talking about. There's all sorts of plot holes. The audio's crap, I didn't shave so I look awful, and it contains both the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. So if it sucks, feel free to hit the bricks, but otherwise, good luck. Don't repeat anything I said here as fact, and here's Soba. What are you doing, Soba? Are you being a good cat? I doubt it. Hey everyone. So for the last few weeks or month, something like that, I've been going on and on about this video toaster stuff. I wrote a big article about it, which I've heavily updated. And partially, that's because I've acquired a lot more of the stuff that I'm actually talking about in that article. Now, I got some more of it yesterday. I received a couple very important pieces of stuff in the mail. And I tried to record a video of it, unboxing the stuff and talking about what it was. And I spent like an hour on it. I just made so many mistakes because I had built a PC to house these parts. The case ended up being completely inappropriate. And then I found out I didn't have the right cables and some other things. And then after the fact, while I was sitting around just feeling bummed about this, I realized that I had spent like 40 minutes just basically reciting this article that I had written, which is like 40 or 50 pages of stuff. And it was probably absolutely impossible for anyone to give a shit about anything I was saying. It was just so much talking. This is what happens when you're like me. You get attached to some idea, something that you can't readily get information on unless you go digging for it. Well, every time you dig out a new piece of information, you become kind of obsessed with being the only person you know who knows it, right? And you wander around talking to other people about it, whoever will listen, and everyone goes, wow, I didn't know any of that. And then they stop talking because, well, they didn't know any of that, so what can they say? You know, what is there to discuss? Back when I was about 14, 15 years old, I got into photography for the first time, and I went and devoured the entirety of these websites about vintage cameras. Photoethnography.com was a big one back then. Stephen Gandy's Camera Quest was a great site, and a few other, Photo.net, a few other places, and I just devoured every single thing on there. And I had nobody to talk to about this stuff at all. You know, I'd send people links to these vintage cameras I'd found, and they'd just be like, that's cool. So, yeah, lifelong frustration, but it ends up coming out in the form of just talking in one incredibly long unbroken sentence, etc., etc. So, I'll try to keep it more succinct today. So, for the past couple of months, and to a certain extent for years before that, I have been sort of obsessed with the fact that NewTek, the company that made the Amiga video toaster, that thing is kind of a meme. You know, millions of people know what it is, and it's kind of funny that they know what it is because it's not really relevant to anyone. Most people are like, oh yeah, the video toaster, that's super cool. And like, if you sat them down in front of it and said, okay, we'll do something with it, they have no idea what to do, you know, and even if they knew how to operate, it doesn't really do anything that interesting. It's like a toy box, you know, for most intents and purposes. You could play with it a little bit, but, you know, 10 minutes, you get bored, you walk away. It's just sort of novel, unless you're actually making, like, I mean, what it was intended for, which was either wacky MTV, you know, music videos or commercials or you know, TV shows back in that sort of very teen-focused era, or like employee training tapes, internal seminar videos, you know, local car dealership advertisements and whatnot. That's what the video toaster was for, and it was novel because it replaced about $50,000 to $100,000 of equipment, depending on how you looked at it and what you were doing with it. So it was very interesting, historically speaking, very novel. And of course, me being the kind of dweeb that I am, having the particular sort of brain problems that I have, I get obsessed with the stuff that no one is talking about, not the stuff that everyone is talking about. And so when I found out that there were toasters that weren't for the Amiga, that weren't the original one that everyone knows about, I got really obsessed with that. And this was years ago, and I've been looking for one ever since. And as you can see, I found one. This here is called the NewTek Video Toaster. It's all it says in the box. But their actual name for it was the Video Toaster NT, because it's the ostensibly it is the reimagined, reinvented video toaster that can run on Windows NT based PCs. And I've written a whole lot about this. I found all this information about it, and I think I've pieced together a history, but I'm going to restrain myself from telling the entire history right now. In short, however, the important thing that I have to explain is that it had been about a decade since the original toaster came out that they put out this product. And in that whole time, they had just been sort of sitting around like, yep, people like our old thing. What's next? What's next? We obviously can't keep just selling this device that's based around this computer that isn't made anymore and you know is very last generation. A lot of people would say the Amiga never died, but for practical purposes, it did, and NewTek didn't want to be anchored to it anymore. And the PC was getting so much better that it was the obvious go forward solution, as business people say now. Well, it took them, from my research, about 6 years to actually solve that problem and to figure out how to get the video toaster into the PC world. And this is not that. This is a failure, and it's fascinating to me. There's not a whole lot of information about it, even once you figure out where to look for information about this stuff. But basically, this is a lie. This isn't what it says it is. This is not a video toaster. This is a rebadged version of a sort of stopgap, half-ass product that they'd made a year earlier called the Frame Factory. And I strongly suspect that they just like really screwed up, that they told everyone it's here, we're finally making the video toaster, but for PC. And then their engineers found out that no, they couldn't do that. It wasn't ready. They couldn't sell it, but they'd already promised to do so. And so this thing came out, and I excitedly bought one on eBay several weeks ago, a month ago, going like, oh man, finally I get to start digging into this stuff. Only to find out once it arrived and I installed it and set it up, and I start going like, where's all the stuff? Like, I have an Amiga toaster. If I was upgrading, the box says upgrade. If I was upgrading from an Amiga toaster to this, I would have been screaming. Like, this box, I found out this cost about $2,500. It contains hardware, it contains software, and it is a pathetic shadow of the video toaster's capabilities. I would have been screaming when this came out in about 1999. I've got a whole story about what happened after that, but the short of it, to jump to the part that's relevant today, a couple years went by, they finally finished the goddamn thing, and they released Video Toaster 2, which is the first real video toaster for PC. And they just sort of quietly forgot that this existed and never mentioned it again. It was a big snafu. People were real mad at them. I found all these Usenet posts where people who were pretty upset, all right? So this is an interesting artifact, but it was not exactly what I wanted. After they made the video toaster, they made the Video Toaster 2, which actually did everything that the Amiga could do and more. And then they made the VT3. They lost the name. They stopped calling it Video Toaster, and they started just calling it VT. And then they made the VT4 and the VT5. Oh, I have a VT5 now. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I picked up the software for the VT5, and then I just needed a card. That's where things kind of get interesting. Sometime last year, I did a video about the TriCaster TCXD 850, I think it was, that I borrowed from somebody. It was that big rack mount unit that I had in the studio. It was a PC-based thing. It had like 8 video inputs on it, and it was like an Amiga video toaster. You could switch inputs. You could do animated transitions. You know, it had the big control board with the T-bar on it and all the buttons lit up and everything. Since then, I'd returned that, But then I got a TCXD 300, which is a much smaller one. Basically the same thing, but only 3 inputs, and it's in a little shuttle case. Maybe I'll put a picture of it on the screen. I think I have a picture of it. And I actually have not done a video about that, but I might have had a patron video that kind of sucked. I don't remember. But then when I did my live show last year, I used the TCXD 300 to do camera switching for it. And I did that in HD. That thing can switch 1080i video. So it's, you know, good enough for broadcast television. And nobody complained. So I guess it did a good enough job. But that was actually a much later version of the TriCaster, which I will remind you is a product made by NewTek, makers of the video toaster. Well, so let's just work our way backwards. This is the TriCaster Pro, and this came out much earlier than that one by about, I think, 3 years, maybe 4 years. And it's basically the same thing. It's got 3 video inputs into which you can put component, composite, or S-video. It does a little bit of audio switching, and then you can use it to do all the same stuff. You can switch cameras with it. You can do animated transitions. You can do, you know, color adjustment, chroma key, all the stuff that a modern broadcast video switcher can do. What those are all about. Except that it is just a little bastard computer. It's literally a Shuttle FG31, I think is the motherboard name, and I think they bought it off the shelf. I don't think they had a distributorship relationship with Shuttle. I think they bought it at like Fry's Electronics, and then they took the front panel off and replaced it with this thing. And on the back side of this panel are a bunch of little analog chips that do analog switching, and then the machine can use that to select an input. But then it just goes into a card. The video goes into this guy here, which is what I'm here to talk about today, because I just got one of these in the mail. But wait, I already have one, so why is that exciting? Well, let's wheel it back a little bit. This is the card that came in that big box I showed you labeled Video Toaster, all right? It's a PCI card, and if you look at the back there, and then you look at the back of this guy here, hey, wait a minute, those look just a little similar, don't they? The original Amiga Video Toaster was a plug-in card that went into a normal Amiga computer, and it had a whole bunch of processor chips on it, like FPGAs and crap. And it would take 2 video signals, digitize them, and then do stuff to them in real time, and then spit it back out. Well, the thing that made it so hard to create a video toaster on the PC is that NewTek decided they didn't want to do that. If they had just wanted to take literally the Amiga toaster and put it in the PC, they could have done it in 6 months. I'm sure of it. Their main guy, Andrew Cross, seems like a genius. If that's all they had been doing, I'm sure it would have happened by like 1996, like when NT4 was first out. But instead it drug on and on and on because they didn't want to use hardware anymore to do all their video switching. The whole point of the Amiga was to get away from the expensive, limited function, hardware-defined devices that were used in the broadcast industry as a whole. Well, with PCs getting much faster, you know, Pentium 2s and Pentium 3s coming along and just becoming vastly quicker, and memory getting so enormous in PCs, they realized that they could probably make a video mixer that did all those crazy effects with, like, you know, the 3D cube that spins and the image twirls off the screen and live chroma keying and all this stuff, all on the CPU. But they had to get the video into the PC and out of it with as little degradation as possible. Well, there were video capture cards available at the time, but the problem is they couldn't spit the video data into system memory fast enough for a program to work with it in real time. So they built their own video capture card. That's what this is. This special card here that you could call a video toaster is not labeled video toaster anywhere, unlike the original one, because this really isn't where the magic happens. All this is a really good, you know, Hauppauge WinTV PVR. I mean, it's a little different because it's a bus mastering device, and it basically sucks in a video image, digitizes it, and then the FPGA packs it into RAM, and then when the PCI bus is available, it spits it across the RAM into the system memory. And then for output, it does the exact same thing in reverse. The software just leaves the next frame to be output laying in memory somewhere. And then this thing reaches across the system bus and pulls it out and then turns it back into analog video and shoots it back out to your television. And that allows them to do uncompressed real-time video recording, which was the whole selling point of that original package. The whole idea was not to do any of the stuff that the original video toaster was for, all the live switching and whatnot. They downplayed all that and said, no, this is an editing system, right? It came with like offline video editing and effects software, and they basically sold this as just a really high quality capture card, which you could use to get lossless, effectively, captures of your analog content, edit it, and then spit it back out in the highest imaginable quality. From like Usenet and whatnot, there were people who bought that video toaster who were very satisfied with it because that's what they'd been doing with the original toaster, but this did an even better job. So it wasn't totally fraudulent, but it wasn't what they intended, right? Okay, well, when they finally released the Video Toaster 2, it used the same card. You could actually just buy a disc that you put in your machine, install a program, and wham, you've got a Video Toaster 2 with all these new features where you can select different cameras and do transitions and do all this real-time shit. All of a sudden, it was all there. Same card that they'd been selling in different guises for different very limited products since 1998 at that point, 4 years later, because all this is an input-output card. And the FPGA on there is reprogrammable. So when they released that new software with all these extra features, they just released an FPGA core update, and Bob's your uncle. Now you had a Video Toaster 2. And then they released another one, the Video Toaster 3, and likewise, they did it again. They just did a software update to the card you already had. Well, at that point, it was getting long in the tooth. So when they went to make the Video Toaster 4, they wanted to put a little more functionality in it, stuff that wasn't quite possible on the original card, partly because it couldn't handle enough input and output streams, if I understand correctly. They're a little vague on all the capabilities of the cards. After selling this thing for years and years, they finally made a new card. And that's the card right there. They call it the VT Pro, but like, this is a TriCaster, not a video toaster. And wasn't I talking about video toasters? Well, it turns out that TriCasters and video toasters are the same thing. They started out that way. This guy, which was one of the first TriCasters ever sold, and as a reminder, TriCaster is still a current brand. You can still buy one brand new that works with like HDMI and SDI and does 4K and whatnot. But it started out here in like 2009, where they basically took a video toaster 5 card, which was the current version when this came out. They put it in a machine they built themselves instead of just selling you the card by itself. And then they put this breakout box and switcher on here and then hooked it all up internally with these horrible little cables. By the way, that's micro coax. I didn't even know that existed. Every one of those little blue wires, that's a coax cable, which they had to do because for analog video, you need maximum possible quality. You can't have any noise, right? Any degradation. And they didn't have nearly the room to run full size like RG59 coax through there, but the machine is shielded. It's got a metal chassis, right? So as long as they use some kind of coax, it should be okay. And that's exactly what they did. This is an interesting piece of equipment. It's a fun little thing. I'd like to make a video about it at some point and just document it in general. Almost nobody talks about this on the general internet. You know, you can go to forums and find people who use these for their jobs saying how much they like them, but you can't find any fan pages about them really. Nobody, screenshots of the software or explaining what it does and how it works and whatnot. Nobody really puts that stuff online, so I wanted to do that. So I got one of these, but then I found out that the capacitors on the motherboard were bad, which is not surprising. This is from the mid-late 2000s, and shuttle machines were kind of notorious for capacitors going bad. And so I had to gut this. I had to pull all those little blue cables and the card and the drive cage and the power supply and completely take it apart. And Daria, who's much better than me at soldering, went through and replaced all the capacitors. And I put it all back together and it all works, but while it was apart, I took the card that was in here and I put it in another machine. And I installed the VT5 software that I have, and it worked because it was the same card. And in fact, I have VT4 software here. There we go, that's VT4, and that works too. But not perfectly. There were some issues. When you go to run the software, when you start it, it says the FPGA core needs to be updated because what's on here isn't a VT5 core, it's a TriCaster core. So it's a little different. And when I hit several options in the program, it would crash. So that's not great. My GoPro just shut off again because it was overheating. I really hate this thing and I need to replace it. I'm not sure exactly where I was, but anyway, I found out while using the VT5 software on the TriCaster's borrowed card that it was really quite different than what ran on the TriCaster from the factory. Some of it was the same, but there's other parts of it that were just completely different. The UI was just night and day. I've been told by a couple people with experience with these that the TriCaster was just a VT5 in a shuttle case, but it turns out that's not really true. They changed quite a bit, and they removed a couple entire pieces of software, like major pieces of software that aren't there anymore. So this made things complicated for me because up until this point, I'd been imagining this little menagerie of NewTek products where I'd have this little guy and then it would be flanked with like a VTNT system that could also run the VT2 and VT3 software. And then I'd have the VT5 software running on the TriCaster, and then the newer HD capable TriCaster would be sitting next to that. So I had this cute little setup with things that I already had. But then once I saw the VT5 software, I realized that I was not going to be able to replicate that experience on the TriCaster, and I didn't want to screw up the TriCaster by installing the VT5 software on it because they're two different experiences, so I wouldn't have my little museum anymore. So the problem is that I've been looking for this stuff for years, and nobody has it. I mean, the TriCasters aren't that rare. I actually got this one for under $150. So that's cool, but I don't want to mess this one up. So I'm going to need another one of those cards to build a dedicated system. And the cards by themselves are rare as hen's teeth. Nobody has them. I've been looking for years with eBay save searches and the occasional manual search and asking people. I posted on Reddit about it. I've been everywhere, and no one has one. They're all either in collections or they got thrown away because nobody knew what it was. There's no label. There's nothing on this card to say what it is. So if someone finds this and like Googles it to try and figure out what it's worth, they won't get anything. There's nothing to Google. So I would guess that gobs of these things have been thrown in the garbage because, you know, all the scrappers who normally are the only reason that we're able to buy bits and pieces of stuff on eBay, there's no way for them to find out what they're worth or to list them or for us to find them. There could be 50 of these on eBay. How would you know? There's nothing to look up. So that's frustrating. But after I got the TriCaster, I was taking a look at the card and I realized that down here somewhere it says MDC G4. It doesn't say video toaster, it doesn't say TriCaster, nothing like that. So all my keyword searches never came up with anything. But it turned out that I put MDC G4 into eBay, one popped up for about $100, the only one. So I bought it, and it just arrived. I think I have some footage from the first shoot of me unboxing it. Here's that. So I got this on eBay from somebody who I don't think knew what they had. Okay, I cut some of that video because I had to very explosively burst these bubbles. Oh, I hope this survived. Oh, that actually looks like it's in fairly good condition. So this is the card. It's known as a VT Pro, and it is exactly identical to the one that is in the TriCaster that I showed you earlier. And the reason I couldn't just use the one from the TriCaster, among other things, is related to these cables here, because the TriCaster has all those ports on the front where you can plug in cameras and video monitors and audio and stuff. But since you're just supposed to put this in a PC that you build yourself, you don't have that. So you've got to have an external module to do that breakout, a breakout box, which is the second package that I got that I'm going to open up here in a couple of minutes. But to connect to that breakout box, you've got to have external connectors. And just the two that are on the card aren't enough. You need enough room for multiple video streams, multiple audio streams, and control signals. And I guess they couldn't squeeze those all into just two VGA-style 15-pin connectors. So they added two more, and then those have to get back to the card, and they do that via these little tiny coaxial ribbon cables, which is kind of wild. So this is part A, and then to complete the VT5 setup that I want to build, we need the breakout box, which I'm going to open up now. This is the Bob. The Bob is very simple. It's actually just a switch box. That's all it does. You put your video signals, cameras, VCRs, whatever in here. You put your audio in here, and then you can get your finished mixed signal out through here, and your finished audio out through here. And so these are all the connectors that connect it to the card in the PC. All this stuff is used for other various external device control. And then all this really does internally is select a signal and send it to the card. That's it. That's not a knife. This is a knife. So basically, we've got a card, and we've got this little breakout board for it, and then we got this set of blue ribbons, and all that has to go into a PC. Well, in the first version of this video, I had this like flat AV Center style PC case from Antec that I thought was really cute, and it was thematically on point because it's a piece of AV gear, right? Oh, well, it turned out the card didn't really fit in it at all. I mean, I got it in there, but it was so cramped, and I could tell that those ribbon cables, which look really fragile, were just going to get crimped and destroyed. So I decided that I needed to put it into a normal case, so I went and got a normal case today. And I also picked up the necessary cables to hook it up to the second part of the system, which I may have had in that little unboxing clip. The card by itself only has these two plugs on the end, and you'd think, since this takes composite video, which only requires two wires, and that's 30 pins, that you'd be able to put in several video signals there, but you can't. The card only has wiring for two signals. So this is the SX8. They made another one called the SX84, but it's the exact same thing with like a different voltage on the tally port. And this uses 4 VGA cables. And they're literally VGA cables. It's not just the HD15 connector. I mean, the new tech documentation says that if you lose the cables this comes with, that you just need to go buy triple shielded VGA cables, and those will work. Well, I didn't have any. So I picked those up, and I got a new case, and I built a new machine in it, and now I'm ready to actually put it all together, and that's what this video is supposed to be about. I'm going to put the cards in the machine. I'm going to hook this guy up. I've never seen this actually work before, so you're going to see along with me whether this actually functions. And then that's kind of it, because you know, I'll poke around the software a little bit, but it's kind of hard to demo. The GoPro here is too stupid to sync to a television. It has no hard shutter speed control that I know of, so I can't get it to actually show the TV screen clearly. And the software is kind of boring to look at unless you have like a good quality capture of it. So eventually I'll do a proper channel video and you'll get to see this stuff in high definition. But the whole point of this video was just to kind of bring you along with the project that I've been working on for the last couple weeks. Because I might not ever make a proper video about this, depending on whether I'm ever able to get the other parts of the project, which, as it happens, is probably another one of these for complicated reasons, and the VT2 and VT3 software, which are non-existent. Nobody has them. But if anyone can find them, if I can just get like an ISO image of the discs, I'll be able to finally finish this little museum of mine. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to get this machine up here and all this stuff cleared out of here, and we'll put this together, and I'll be back with you in about 15 minutes because I got really sidetracked by stuff. But anyway, here's the machine. So this is actually a micro ATX board because the machine I originally built it in was micro ATX. But it led to me finding out that this particular PCI slot, because the card in question is PCI, not PCI Express, is actually ideal. It's not down here, which is important because it's a double stacked card. So if it's down here, it actually, I'll dig the card out in a moment, you'll see, it would overlap all this stuff and also make it very hard to get to SATA ports and things like that. So if it's too far up, there won't be anywhere to put the breakout board bracket, which has the cables going to it. And I needed a larger case because I needed room to curve the cables. But otherwise, this is a completely ordinary machine that's like a 1150 chip. It's like a Core i7 3rd gen, something like that. Actually, not half bad. I put this card in here for kicks. So like some PCI Express GeForce. I might take it out. I literally don't need it. The machine has no use for any sort of graphics acceleration. I could probably use the onboard just fine. 8 gigs of memory, just a little basic. I think it's like 160 gig SATA hard drive. Requirements are not very high. Let's get the card out. So, funny thing about this. The seller shipped it to me exactly the way you just saw it. And I thought, wow, that's kind of absurd. You know, they didn't take the cables off or anything. They could have gotten crushed, you know, screwed up in transit. And then I sort of realized that, I don't know what I expected them to do, because if you take the connectors out, and they're like the LVDS connectors that you see in like laptop LCD panels, they're kind of hard to get out to begin with without like damaging them. So maybe it's a good thing that the seller didn't try and take them out, because he could have just like torn them out of the connectors and ruined them. And also, there really is no way to ship them effectively other than to very gently tape them into a coil and then send them in a separate box. I actually got it all installed in the previous case and then tried to plug the plugs in and found out that it was actually a huge pain in the ass, and I ended up just putting it all back together with the cables already in. And that seemed to make more sense. But because I'm doing it in this larger case with more breathing room, I think I am going to take these connectors out. And normally I do this with a screwdriver, but since I got some fingernails right now and plenty of space to work, I'll just pull those out. There we go. Ooh. You can see how tense this cable is. And if you've ever taken apart a laptop, you might actually recognize that connector. It's like a normal LVDS connector. It's just that it has coax going into it instead of differential signal pairs. I didn't like the noise that produced when I unplugged it, so I'm going to try not to ever do that again. I'm really hoping that I didn't screw up that connector. Oh no, it looks fine. All right, so we're just going to pop this guy in here. I'm not normally very good at cable management, but again, look how little room we've got here. Like the ATX cable really wants to get in here, and the damn SATA cables are really getting in there. In fact, I'm going to have to move those a little bit because there's really no room for the blue ribbons to get through. Gosh, this sucks. With the SATA cables moved down a tier and then routed over instead of under, I think this will work. So let's put a screw in this. Then let's gently get the ribbon cables in there. And I have to sort of finesse them ahead of time to make sure they don't get caught, because they'll try and bend themselves sideways like that one just did. Oh my god, it's already going to hell. Oh man, this sucks. Moving virtually anything is going to involve disturbing these cables. And although I think I figured out what vendor originally produced them, if they get damaged, I don't really think I can get a replacement. I don't really think that's practical. It seems like they no longer produce them, and NewTek no longer produces them. So I think I'd be kind of screwed. So that's fun. I think that's in. All right, I think I got it. Now we can already sort of see another problem, which is that these cables are just sort of mashing right up against the heat sink for this guy. Now, there's no fan on that graphics card, so that makes it a little less of a problem because they're not likely to get chewed on if they work their way up there. But this heat sink is still going to get a little warm, so I guess these are going to kind of be cooking, but maybe that's not so much of a problem. So maybe we're good to go. Final thing, there is a power connector on this board. I wasn't sure what it was for at first, because there isn't a power connector on the original board. It just runs off the bus. NewTek says that this is for powering the external breakout box, which sort of makes sense, but then how did it work on the original card, which didn't have that connector? I don't know if anybody cares about 3/4 of the crap I've said in this video, but whatever, it's what I'm doing right now. You can watch or not, I guess. Okay, one of the ports on here, this guy here that's labeled Tally, you wire that up to lights on your cameras and monitors that tell you which camera input is active at the moment. Like PVMs have that little white light over the screen. That's what that's about, if you don't know. And that light can either be powered by itself, in which case you just have to have a switch closure at this end, and then the voltage from the light's own power supply can go through the loop and run the light. Or, and this seems to be the more popular way of doing it, this can emit voltage itself. Well, this version uses a 3.3 volt tally light signal, and the SX84, the version that was made for the second card, uses a 5 volt tally signal. And I suspect they couldn't get enough 5 volt off the PCI bus to run the lights, so they had to add auxiliary power. Another weird thing about that, though, is that both versions of the breakout box apparently work with both cards. So what happens to the 5 volt tally voltage when you use it on the original card that doesn't have the connector? Well, I found this forum thread on the NewTek forums where somebody was talking about, I think they were trying to get the original VT-NT card to work on like a Pentium 4 machine circa like 2002, and it wouldn't function. And it came down to concluding that the PCI bus in the newer machine didn't provide a necessary voltage that was present in earlier machines. Or maybe I have it backwards. I don't know. So maybe if your machine is old enough that you'd be putting the original card in it, then it's going to have that 5 volts on the PCI slot, and it won't need the power supply anyway and can run either one of these things. I don't know. I don't even know if I included the last 5 minutes of speculation on how the breakout box power supply worked. But if anybody is still watching at this point, let's turn this thing on. Oh, shit. That's fine. Hey, there's a disc in there. Oh, there's no disc in there. It sounded like there was a disc. Rock solid. Heart touching. Asus. Wait, reboot and select proper boot device. Well, it would help if the hard drive was plugged into power. There we go. Where's my mouse? Where is my mouse? There it is. As you can see, I installed the appropriate NewTek wallpaper so we get the right experience. So as I was saying, the video toaster in the Windows world is just a program. And that's the program. It's loading. Your last session did not exit cleanly. Yeah, it does that a lot. Unlike the original Amiga toaster, it doesn't have a fixed interface. Instead, you have to build your interface yourself. So, if you're doing live switching, then you turn on the switcher. And if you're, if you don't care, if you're just using external preview monitors, you can just do that and you're done. But if you want to see what you're doing on the computer, then you turn on some video monitors. Okay, we put those on there. There we go. And we set the right one to program and the left one to preview. You can also set them to show you the downstream keyer status or the effects bus or specifically the main bus. And then we also can add more components. So all these things up here are different components, so you can sort of build your own video switching system. So I want a static background that I'm going to put on the main output. So I've just put a background generator here. And if I wanted, I could get another background generator and put it down here and put a different background color set on that. And there's also DDRs, which I don't know what the term stands for, but it's a video player. So we can grab a video and put that in here. Let's get, no, I'm sick of that guy. Let's get this one. Here we go. Put that on loop, hit play. All right. So now we've got some sources internal to the device. So this is all just running in the computer. And I want to point out, you know what this card's doing right now? Nothing. Nothing at all. This is just a normal piece of software. But if I were to plug in all the outputs here, which I'll do in a minute, then you would see that whatever's in this pane here, the program display, is actually being output as NTSC video from this card right now. It won't look very good, even if I turn on the TV here, because the GoPro is too stupid to look at CRTs. But it's only on the preview at the moment, so if I want to put it over on the program, so it'll actually output, then I hit that, and we do a ridiculous transition. I guess I still had the sponge in there. Yeah, we can do like the page curl, and we could do the flying cube. There we go. So it's got all the ridiculous sort of like Kiki wipe style absurd transitions, although it doesn't literally have the Kiki wipes. I've been thinking about trying to figure out how to import those, but anyway, these inputs are now here on the program bus, which is a skeuomorphic representation of a physical hardware-based video switcher, and these generators that I created appeared on inputs 4 and 5. So if I select those, there we go. But then you can assign any of these any way you want. So I right click on this, I can pick any of these sources that I created, and you can get other stuff. You can get a title card generator, or you can add more video players and stuff like that. And so you can stack up as many of whatever sort of output you need on the bus here. And this is fully multi-core enabled, so it'll just keep using more and more cores as needed to make it possible. And in fact, if I remember correctly, yeah, I can actually set this to 24 inputs. There we go. And now we can stack up even more, videos and images and whatnot, so that we can do a whole show made entirely out of video that's coming out of the computer itself without ever involving this card. And my GoPro shut off due to heat again, and I got sick of waiting for it to cool off, so I'm just shooting on my phone now. Anyway, yeah, so this whole thing can be self-contained if you want. If you just wanted to use it for doing a production with all saved content, you could do that. And in fact, it also has a video editor. This is thing here called SpeedEdit VT. So if you just want to use this as an offline video authoring system, you can totally do that. We could go here to timeline, there we go, and then go to computer, let's go to content, let's get some video, here we go, let's put some video up here. All right, and then we can get, transitions and drop those on there. It's like Adobe Premiere, right? It's got keyframes, it's got curves, you can do effects and transitions and blends and all this other crap, and then you can have it spit out a video feed, which I think, am I right that you can actually, I think you can actually use this as an input. Yeah, there we go. So we could actually set this as the output, and then we could conceivably actually edit video on the fly, like while a production is going on. We could edit video and then switch to it as an input directly on the switcher, which is kind of rad, because you could literally be sitting here doing like a news program, and like you've got new footage coming in as the program's proceeding, right? Somebody's walking in and handing you an SD card and like, here it is, here's the field footage. You could pop it in your machine, drag the videos in here to this program, start putting transitions on them, and then when, the director goes, all right, take VTR, you don't need to render it. You can just hit play and then hit, there's a physical console you can get for this that has the T-bar and just like with the TriCaster, it's got the full external control console. You could hit input 6 and then fade over to it and hit, as you hit play in this program, and bam, your freshly edited news package that hasn't even been rendered is actually going out live. How cool is that? I mean, that's why they call it SpeedEdit, right? So, yeah, quite a lot of functionality. And it's got a whole bunch of other stuff. I think this deck control thing, I think literally lets you hook up videotape recorders. Pretty sure you can hook up like a set of DV camcorders or VCRs or whatever, and then when you hit play in the program, it'll just tell the deck to start playing, right? So this centrally controls your whole production. You can also get scopes if you're a broadcast engineer and you actually know how to read these things, and use those to tune up your video to make sure it's legal and everything before it gets output. There's also a complete audio mixing system. It's got a whole mixer board in here. I don't think they had a physical control surface for this, unfortunately, so I think you'd be limited to doing it in the program. But you've got presets over here, right? So if you were running like a news program, then you could put a preset for, when the weatherman's talking over here, and just pull that up on the fly, and it would automatically mute and unmute the appropriate mics, which normally in a TV studio is a job done by an entirely separate individual, right? So at this point, this thing is a threat. It's basically eliminating people's jobs and collapsing them into one worker. Wait a minute. Abort. 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 Oh, there's also this thing called IVGA, which this is mutated. So IVGA is basically, suppose you have a computer in the studio, like back on Tech TV when they would pull up a web page and they'd put it on the screen. You could run a program on your PC that would just continuously do a screen capture and then shoot it across the network to anyone who was asking for it. It was called IVGA, was the protocol, and it has mutated into NewTek NDI, which is I think a more or less open protocol. It does the exact same thing, except you can now get a plug-in for OBS if you want, so that you can have a PC somewhere that's streaming video and then OBS is just ingesting it over the network. Oh my God, that video is terrifying. Let's skip that one. I use this capability. I've actually used it several times. It's incredibly cool. I have an app on my phone. I pull it up. It's just a camera view, and I hit NDI, and then on my PC in OBS, bam, it just appears as a source. Audio, video, whole thing, very little latency, zero configuration. It just works. It's wonderful. And during my live show last year, I put NDI on a laptop, and Daria was able to fade to it in OBS to bring in web pages and things like that, and it just worked. Zero problems. But it started out here as a NewTek product on the VT called iVGA, and you can actually still get this. You can get the iVGA cast program, run it on your Windows 10 PC, and cast to a video toaster system. I don't know if is this DVD authoring thing real, or does this just open? I think this just opens, YouLead DVD Workshop, which is this crusty old thing. Oh, and it also supports live streaming. Not very good live streaming. Now, this machine can only do standard def, but even for a live stream, it would only do 480 by 360 at 30 FPS, which kind of sucks. Of course, when it came out, live streams weren't really that much of a thing, so you were probably streaming in standard def to like Justin.tv. So anyway, in addition, because we're not done yet, there's more functionality here. You see why I'm so fascinated by this thing? There's so much going on. So first off, we've got the CG Designer, which is essentially, well, this is a title card maker, and it's essentially like, it's a vector art program, right? It does have like this really nice Bezier curve drawing tool, and that's pretty cool. And then you can like very quickly set up these pretty nice looking images with this thing. I'm not doing a great job right now, but I had a whole thing in here that I had hoped to show you. Although, you know what's fun is the machine has just hung. For some reason, I've had the CG Designer sort of soft crash the software several times. I don't know what that's about. Again, while that CG Designer is running, you can actually use it as a live input on the video bus if you want. So you can just fade straight to that. Or you can save the images and then recall them later. It also has a thing called Aura, which is a very long distant descendant of an ancient piece of software for the Amiga called Video Paint. TV Paint, I believe is what it started out as. And this is fascinating. Let me show you something this does that just blows me away. So it's got a pretty nice airbrush tool. It's not rendering very well on my phone, but it actually looks very nice and soft and organic. But it's also a keyframe animation system, so you can actually use this for rotoscoping. And at least in the original version, I don't know if this one has it, but there's actually supposed to be a program in here that lets you pull in frames from the video toaster. So you can actually rotoscope with this. You can pull in a frame and it'll burn it right into a layer. And then you can make a new frame and advance your videotape and then do another clone. And then you can step through each one of them, drawing over the image. So yeah, that's pretty cool, right? Well, anyway, what I wanted to show you though is I'm going to right click and it erases. Okay, not that big a deal, but watch this. Let's get a blue, put that on there, and now let's erase, and what? Let's do that again. Spray on, and then spray off. So I was thinking at first it was doing some sort of wild color manipulation, detection, separation shit, but no. I think all that's going on is when you paint with a new color, it's saving it on a new layer. So you can do some more painting if you want and then go back and erase it. But as soon as you change the color, it won't erase it anymore because it's collapsed it into the layer underneath it. So it makes a temporary layer so that you can easily undo without having to undo all at once. I don't think anything else has ever done that. It's fascinating. So yeah, very interesting piece of software. This was actually available as a standalone application, and you can find pirated versions of it on like Internet Archive, I think. So yeah, go check that out if you're an artist. I think you'll be fascinated by that. Now, I don't know if Aura, I don't think Aura can act as a live input. Oh my God, it actually can. Okay, all this software is integrated into the VT, so we can actually take this as a transition destination.
So we can go there, and yeah, we can actually treat that as a video input, right? So I've done all this stuff so far, and I've not actually done anything with the card that I just installed. But of course, the card also acts as a dongle, so if it wasn't installed, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. So then we've got Lightwave 3D, which I can't fully demonstrate right now because I think I need to wipe and reload. This has not worked correctly since I installed it. I think something went wrong when I installed it. But this is the famous 3D modeling application that was used for Babylon 5. Originally they used the Amiga version. And what's interesting about that specific anecdote, people always bring it up, but as I recall reading about it, they used the Amiga for I think the first season, and then they transitioned to an NT-based system because Lightwave actually made it to the PC before the whole rest of it. This was on PC in like 1994, 95, something like that. It was available for I think the first Windows NT. And in fact, they ported this to Alpha, MIPS, and the other one I forgot. So there are actually Windows NT Alpha systems out there that have this on it, and if you ever find one, it is your solemn duty to make sure a copy of it gets preserved, because nobody has the install media, because only 7 people ever bought Alphas. Anyway, I would absolutely love to demo this for you, but yeah, it just doesn't work correctly at the moment, and I'm not sure why. But it does really very nice looking CG graphics, and again, you can use it as an input over here. So there's all this wild stuff, and then we've got the actual inputs from the card itself. So you'll notice that all I have are composite, S-Video, and component, which are the first 3 inputs here. And of course, I only actually have one of those at any given time, because the only way I would currently be able to use this without the breakout box plugged in would be to plug in a VGA to BNC adapter, the same sort you'd use to hook up a monitor to like a projector with separate color channel inputs. You plug it into one of the ports on the back, and then you can use the BNCs to take one of these formats, but there's only enough for one. You can't put in another signal, so you've got to get the Bob. So I've never tried this Bob. You're about to find out with me whether it works. So I'm going to get it out and hook it up and figure out where all these VGA cables go, and I'll be back with you in about 30 minutes because it doesn't work. And I don't have all the cables hooked up right now, but that's not the problem, because I ran Nutex Diagnostics and they informed me that I have a bad daughter board. This guy right here, this is the analog daughter board that apparently is responsible for handling the breakout. I mean, that is, after all, where the ribbons connect. And it's not responding to I2C requests. And I'm being told by Minimal Cav, who has been helping me out a ton with this stuff, and has been an indispensable resource, thank you so much, that it is probably either the voltage regulator that's on there or one of the Samsung RAM chips. Well, for the moment, we'll at least hook up the breakout cable. I've got that, so I'll be back in a minute. I'll at least be able to show you the video output. Alright, there you go. I've just got this BNC adapter cable hooked up, and it's going. And if I hit the transition button here, there it is. And again, I can't get even my phone to play ball with the CRT, but in the real world, this looks really clean and extremely smooth. Here, let me show you one of my favorite things about this. This is all happening in real time. So this guy's talking. When I pull him onto the page curl, he's still talking, which makes sense, but still seems surprising. But not super sure what to do now, because this was the only affordable card I could find. I've spent like $130 on this so far, and I bought this card primarily because it came with the ribbons and the breakout board. And now that I've got that, I suppose I could go on and spend another $160 on one of the other cards that's on eBay right now. But if that has a toasted analog board, then now I'm out $300 with no progress made on the project. There's a slim possibility I'll be able to repair it myself, but I'm not going to hold my breath for that. Can't decide whether this is a dick move or not. I could buy another TriCaster,
because they're useless. I wouldn't necessarily need to feel bad about pulling another one off the used market. And then I could take the card out of that, leave the rest of the machine intact. So I've got a cold spare for parts for the other TriCaster. I have not been this profoundly sad about anything I've collected in quite a while. I really thought I'd gotten away with something here. Okay, hold up. We got a Star Wars situation here. There's a New Hope. I unplugged the breakout box from the card, and it no longer says that the analog daughter board is missing. So apparently the breakout box is shorting out the card or dragging a rail down or something. So maybe I have a bad bob, which is less of a problem. I only paid $15 for this one. Or maybe it's something wrong with my cabling, or I don't know. I gotta work on it. Oh my God. It has been at least an hour, perhaps two. I finally have an answer. Everything's good. My card is fine. Everything's fine. It's all working. But the explanation is incredibly dumb. So it's like this. I think I mentioned this. The breakout box hooks up to the video toaster with VGA cables, ordinary VGA cables. Per NewTek, per the manual, it says VGA cables. They say you should use triple shielded ones, which you should always use, ideally. But that's all it says. When I unplugged the cable going to the breakout box and then ran the diagnostics, the analog daughter card that was not showing up before suddenly showed up. And when I plugged it back in, it would go away again. Well, I started looking at pinouts, and I discovered something. Hear all those beeps? I hope you can. Anyway, VGA cables originally had 15 wires in them, but a bunch of those were used for grounds. And some people don't realize that there's a purpose in having separate grounds for different signals. So a lot of cable vendors just tie all those grounds together internally. On a properly built cable that has one wire per pin, you should not find any connectivity between any two pins when the cable's not plugged in at the other end. They should all be distinct, but they're not. I'm checking between the ground, shield, and pin 11 right now, and it's connected. On a VGA cable, pin 11 is the ground for the EDID, which is how the monitor talks to the PC to tell it what its resolution and whatnot is. On this card, it's plus 10 volts. So when you plug this cable into the VT card, it shorts out the 10 volt rail, which kills the entire daughter board. That cable's affected. This cable's affected. This cable's affected. This cable's affected. I have two more cables here that are affected. So it seems to be virtually all VGA cables that do this. The only one that I had that doesn't turned out to be the one that looked the cheapest. A little black cable that looked like it was packed in with a modern Core i7 Dell Optiplex. I did not think would be any good, but it works, and my card is not dead, and everything's functioning. Here's the switcher software. As you can see, it now shows a lot of buttons because input 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and if I go here to the Bob, you can see that input 1 is selected, and there we go. There's input 2 and input 3 and so on when I press the buttons. And I actually do have my camera plugged in here. I got my video going out to my TV. It's all working. It's all hot. Outstanding. Now, a fun thing I wanted to point out, this looks like it's 8 inputs. It's not. It is 24 inputs. This is wired up for component video, YUV. But if you're just doing composite, you can ask this thing to just send you any one of these jacks to the composite pins on the video cable, which means this is a 24 input switcher.
which is pretty wild. Now, mind you, you can't monitor all of those at once unless you have those signals broken out externally and sent to a separate monitor. I might put a picture of the insides of this thing on the screen because there's a lot of parts in this box, it turns out. A lot of electronics, so I suspect that this is basically a matrix switcher that can hook anything up to anything else. That's pretty cool. Anyway, if you ever get one of these, please be advised that the control cable has to be a fully wired up eDID compatible VGA cable. I've got a little test on my website I wrote up on how to test for this and what the symptoms are and whatnot. But then the other three, they can be whatever. They can be garbage VGA cables with shorted together grounds. They'll still work. It doesn't affect the video signals. There's one audio signal. Audio channel 3 gets choked out, but that's not a problem. It'll just be silent. It won't damage anything. But I think that if you screw up this, if you plug in a control cable that's got those shorted grounds and don't catch it quickly enough, you'll probably fry this card, which is irreplaceable. So I got lucky. I can't believe this information wasn't online anywhere. It is now. I put it on my website, so now other people will benefit from it. Another kind of terrifying thing that happened was I was running this diagnostic program over and over to as I tried, swapping cables, unplugging things, doing this, that, and the other thing to try and figure out what combination of factors was killing the card. And when I got it working, I fired it up and it started patching the FPGA in the Bob. And I freaked out because I didn't realize it was going to do that, and now it's in the middle of a brickable process. So fortunately, it completed in 10 seconds. So, no big deal. But I wasn't thinking about it. What if I didn't know where my hands were? What if I popped a cable out and bricked the damn Bob? Oh my God, things can get worse. But anyway, I don't know if I included the part earlier where I was almost crying over this, but when I thought the card was dead here, I was incredibly bummed. But instead, I've managed to actually generate a bunch of new information about this thing and how it works. So sort of the opposite outcome. And everything functions, so I got what I wanted. Wow. All right, that's the end of the video, such as it is. I hope you got something from that. If you did, then great, glad to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already and you like whatever the hell it is I'm doing over here. I do want to take a moment, as usual, to thank my patrons, though, because stuff like all the things I was talking about in this video are so esoteric and rare. They only pop up on eBay, once every 2 or 3 years. And your continued support makes it possible for me to grab those things when they show up instead of letting them disappear for another 2 years. So at this point, I have 3 toaster cards and 2 TriCasters, and that's only because you folks are making it possible for me to pursue my weird passion projects, to just buy random cards on eBay because that's where my heart tells me to do. Most of the weird stuff I get hasn't even ended up in videos because it's so hard to cover. I can't really figure it out. And that's why I decided to just release this one in whatever state it's in because who knows? Maybe I'll never figure out how to cover this stuff properly, but at least now I've done it at all. So thank you all for your support. And to everyone else, thank you for watching whatever this was.